It's really cool because technology is in a place where this is possible, where you can deploy AI on top of these data sets that are already there at scale, deployed at scale. They're mature technologies, and that can drive operational improvements and efficiency. So very exciting overall. Next slide. There's a lot more vehicle types by EVs, hybrid, heavy, light duty. The complexity is increasing significantly for running a fleet. And so what is important at the center of this is information. There's a lot of information around how to fix these vehicles, around what the vehicles are telling you from telematics. So paying attention to the right things at the right time. So how do you prioritize assets that are at high risk and then get your team to take the right actions? That's what's going to drive uptime. That's what's going to save money. All while, if we go to the next slide, all while we're all experiencing huge market impact. So, shortages of high-skill labor, technicians. It's even if you have good technicians and a good roster, there's a risk of, the young generation just not getting into this field, which is quite dangerous because the demand is there. We still need to keep these vehicles up and running, no matter what the propulsion type is, to be honest. And that's so important to our economy. The other piece is just costs. Everything everywhere has gone up, but for assets, purchasing an asset is anywhere from 10 to 30% more. Getting parts is more expensive and more difficult, takes longer. So with these additional pressures, how do you do more with less? It's not like your budget increased as much as these costs and these pressures are increasing. And the only way is, again, to squeeze more efficiency out of our current process, which is possible with predictive analytics. So on the next slide, what we're showing is the fact that you have information today. Some of you guys might have already tried to tap into it, but it's really, really overwhelming. If you have, let's say, 500 assets, at any time, you could have 1,000, sometimes 2,000 fault codes, for example, alerts. There's no way that your team is manually going to dissect and figure out what is important from that, what is high risk, what's low risk. That really takes using software and AI to sift through the data, to cross-reference with what technicians have been doing over the past 6 months to repair these types of issues, and then to provide you the best guidance on what action to take next. And so this is what it comes down to, is the data is there. We've invested in telematics. We've invested in tools like AssetWorks to capture this and store it. But in order to make it more actionable and useful, we have to be able to apply analytics tools on top to extract insights at the right time and right place. And so that's really, really what it comes down to for what predictive analytics can be. And how this impacts the business, if you go to the next slide, it's all related to operational costs. So can I maintain this mean time to repair between service visits for all my assets? So how do you eliminate rework or repeat service visits fundamentally? Right now we have too much PMs and we're backlogged. Well, why are we doing that many PMs? That's a really big question mark. Do we really need to be inspecting every vehicle every 3 months? No, there's some that you do, there's others that you don't, but how do you dynamically make the right decision? You can do so with data, but you can't just do it if you're riding blind or off of gut feelings. And experience also can help a lot, but it's hard to scale experience. So if you have a few people with a lot of experience with the organization, as new people come in, it's hard to just pass and download experience into new staff. So you want to have processes that are automated and software tools that can support with that. And then just increased pressures that cause more downtime. The average age of assets is increasing, which is fine as long as we can maintain and keep them on the road. And so that's really what we're seeing today. And so it's a perfect time for predictive analytics. So what it can do for you, and go to the next slide, is provide real-time insights around what actions to take. So what would happen is all your fault codes and all your sensor data, so things like battery voltage every 4 to 8 seconds, tire pressure data, various diesel exhaust system after treatment sensors around soot levels and looking at how fast fluid levels are being consumed allows you to tell the fleet, hey, here are 3 assets that have critical issues. If we do not attend to it, they are going to get stuck. Either the engine's going to derate, or we're going to see tomorrow when you try to start the vehicle, the battery's going to be dead. So being able to provide that level of insight and guidance improves diagnostic efficiency. It reduces the need to go to service through a tow or road call event, and make our preventative service plans more smart and more intelligent. And this pushes us from this world of preventative, where we're taking every single asset and bringing it in at the exact same mileage or engine hours or time, which means that you're assuming all vehicles are driven on the same routes with the same loads in the same environment, which is always not true. So if we paid attention to things like fault codes, sensor data, and we cross-reference that with repairs we've been doing historically, you can tell what assets are at high risk of breaking down with over 95% accuracy, and then make those decisions. So that acts in remote diagnostics as step 1, and then that moves into predictive, being preventative. Now, as you build trust with these types of tools and analytics systems, even if you start with remote diagnostics, over time, what happens is you'll start doing things like, okay, we're seeing the season's about to change. These Volvo VNLs have starter motor related issues popping up. Let's just order 5 starter motors right now to be prepared for the season. And so things like that, decisions like that can really help you save costs and be ready for moments of downtime. And it's all data driven. So it's not guessing. It's really based on what assets are telling you. So it's really exciting time in the market overall to be able to do this. So I want to talk about a prime example. So does this actually work? It sounds good. Maybe you've heard about this for the past decade or so. It's not, I think conceptually it's not that new, but applying it and actually showing real tangible value, I think that's really the breakthrough that we're really excited to be able to explore here with AssetWorks and with the network. So with the city of Long Beach, we focused on 600 assets over about a 4 to 5 month period. It was a mixed fleet. We had electric vehicles on one side, diesel like garbage trucks. We had CNG sweeper assets driving around as well. And then of course, a lot of mid tiered assets like pickup trucks, vans, things like that, that help just move the fleet around. And so what we found with the city of Long Beach was that, if you go to the next slide, that there was specific scenarios and cases when compounded over the weeks started to really help the fleet make good decisions. So here's an example where prior to the holiday season over Christmas, there was a number of alerts sent through the tool to their team around weak batteries and batteries that are signaling that, hey, if you come back after the holiday and you try to start one of these assets, it's going to die. And so that allowed them, instead of at that moment when they need to get that vehicle on the road, bringing a booster and charging it, is, hey, let's run that vehicle for anyone who's in the office during holidays. Let's make sure we start up those assets that have a weak battery. And so that just helps you save that much more time getting the job done, having assets available when you really need it. And so it's cases and examples like this compounded over time that really drives efficiency. And that's where I want to show you some of the efficiency impacts. So what we were able to quantify for the city of Long Beach is, through examples like that, you can improve diagnostic efficiency by 17%. That's about 20 minutes on every single service, simply by having remote analysis of what's the state of an asset, what are the types of issues, what are the troubleshooting guides that we're going to have to deploy in order to get to the root cause, or in some cases, it also identifies the root cause. And with all that, you now can make a decision before even bringing a vehicle into the shop around, hey, which technician and which bay are we going to bring it into? What tools are we going to need? What parts? And have them ready to go and perform the job. Of course, there's always edge cases that that the tool and system is going to get smarter with. And that's where the input from each user is really valuable. So let's say a alert pops up as a critical, and you're noticing, hey, on our fleet, we're in a very humid environment. So because of that, we get these intake manifold related issues very often, but it's not really critical for us. You're able to make that adjustment, and the system will save that information, so that next time these scenarios pop up, it'll now mark it as a major instead of a critical. So there's intelligence built into this, where it's learning. It also takes your work order data, so everything that you're entering into AssetWorks around, hey, this engine intake manifold related issue, every time it comes in, like 8 times out of 10, someone's cleaning or changing the EGR. So the next time this alert pops up, it'll actually tell you, hey, historically, in recent history, the repair was a clean or replace of EGR. So just be prepared for that type of action. And so that over time, when you start to extrapolate the impacts, is for the city of Long Beach, about 600 assets, that's a $800,000 impact to improving uptime, to diagnostic efficiency, to reducing tow and road call events. And that's really, really exciting. It's real tangible value. And it works its way down to each user that's actually working on the fleet, all while being integrated with your existing workflow, with your existing interface within AssetWorks. So that's something that we're going to have Mark speak about in just a moment. I just want to show one other example, though, on the next slide, around how remote diagnostics, so not even just speaking about predictive, which we believe is the future, but I think there's a few steps to fully predictive. And one of the steps is effective remote diagnostics. So based on these alerts, filtering out criticals from majors, from minors, from ghost codes that don't actually lead to a next step action, it's very valuable to be able to do that consistently and reliably. And you don't have time to put a head technician who has a lot of experience sitting there looking at a computer screen, reading every single diagnostic code. I mean, that's just crazy, like, to try to organize that. So what this tool ultimately does is organize that for you on your behalf. It's referencing your own experience through AssetWorks, all that history that you're putting in there around what was fixed, what was repaired. So having the right job codes or reason for failure codes or breakdown codes, having that all encoded, the VMRS encoding, becomes very valuable, so that this feedback loop becomes accurate. So this is one of the really exciting things here, is that it can help set up the shop so that they are doing their job most efficiently, and we're leveraging technicians efficiently in a time and where having good technicians can be difficult. And we have a crisis with educating the young guys and wanting them to even come into this field. All while we want to drive improvements in uptime. This is like a perfect storm for this type of tool and solution, and it's very practical, and we're excited to work with you guys on it. So Mark, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the actual partnership and how it works.
Sure, thanks, Shiva. So yeah, as Shiva mentioned, we ran this pilot with Long Beach as well as Serco, which is a maintenance contractor who managed several other AssetWorks fleet. And as part of the pilot, then we interviewed both groups to get some feedback as to how this type of data should best be integrated into their AssetWorks workflows. And a couple of key points that came out are shown here on the slides. One, there was a reluctance to have these automatically generate worker service requests. Some early experiences with predictive analytics did that, where every message created a service request or a work request. And what many of our customers found is that was a lot of noise. As Shiva mentions, the prioritization that they give to the insights from the diagnostic codes is really the value here. Today, it's a fire hose. They come at you randomly. Some may be as simple as a gas cap being loose. Some may be critical, predictions of immediate failure. So just throwing all those into service and work requests creates a tremendous amount of, now I've got to call these vehicles in, I've got to do an inspection. In some cases, it's just not necessary. And so the feedback was, don't automatically make these, just generate work for me. However, we want them to be like a service or work request, that when I open up a work order, I want to know these in my face. I want to see them. And so in today's current telematics workflow, we do have links on our work orders today that will show the current diagnostic codes and information that we're receiving directly from the vehicle bus itself. And so we're going to go ahead and bring these in and display them into our workflow so that you will be able to see them and then act on them without necessarily having to create a work request. However, if you want to, and you do get an insight, say you do get a major insight that comes in and you want to schedule the vehicle in, you'll have an easy way from that insight to generate a work request. The other thing that's also a little bit different is that when in the feedback that we found from the groups was that in many cases, the way you would handle the workflow is that you would create maybe a single diagnosed job. So if you had, like in this example here of this health report, these multiple insights currently outstanding, you might group these 10 items into one diagnosis job, and the technician would hook up to the vehicle, run the diagnosis, come back, and then make the recommendations for the follow-on work. And then that may spawn a series of different jobs. For example, one to handle the O2 sensor versus handling the engine cylinders or the intake manifolds. So one of the things that we're going to need to do is be able to map then which corrective jobs went to which insight. So as Shiva said, we can learn then what the responses are to this work. This is a big data exercise. So as we get more data, we get more information, we get more accurate. The other couple pieces of feedback were that we do want in the notes that when we do add these items to the work order to bring in notes. And so we're looking at populating the complaint and correct or cause notes based off of the insight header as the cause, and then through learned insights, what the correction or what the cause may be. And then it would be up to the customer to identify the cause or the correction. Additionally, the other thing that did come back from the group was that in the case of critical items, they wanted instant, immediate notification. And so anything that is ranked as a critical, we will be generating email notifications directly from Pitstop to the assigned parties, the responsible parties that are set up in the Pitstop environment for the various assignments, so that they do get an alert right away that there's an outstanding issue that needs to be immediately attended to. Next slide, Rick, please. So how are we going to deploy this, and what's it going to look like? So we are working right now to target this delivery for version 23.1. We are currently in the process of standing up our test environment. We've ran through the initial development. Right now, we're going to be hooking up Long Beach's actual data into our test environment, reading their actual insights, and then processing that right into their fleet focus workflows. And so there's really not a lot to see with this type of integration because it's all in the background, running behind the scenes. But what we'll be doing is we're going to be making available an endpoint for Pitstop to extract the assets that you've enrolled in the program. So inside of Fleet Focus, you'll have two new fields to indicate who the telematics service provider and the data science provider is. Pitstop will pull all those assigned to them and pull their assets in history. And then they'll continue to monitor all of those vehicles and then send to us the prioritized insights, which will then go into our new predictive cloud. And then from that predictive cloud, we're going to pull the data into our analytics platform, where we're going to be developing some visualizations to help you analyze the insights, as well as to have some visualizations to help you identify ROI. Additionally, then, we're going to use the existing telematics workflow to bring in any of the insights right into a work order, with a big difference of being, we are going to now ask you to tag the insight to the corrective job. So that will be the new piece of data that we'll collect so that we can now then map to know that, oh, this O2 sensor was corrected with this job on this work order. And that, again, is just to help us learn and get better at that prediction. And then lastly, in phase 2, which will be later this year, we are adding to our Edge mobile platforms, the portals, to the supervisor portal. We're enhancing the existing fault functionality to add in the insights so that you'll be able to visualize between the critical, major, and minors, and then act upon them, either reading them, adding them to a work request, or adding them directly to a work order, so that you'll have the ability to manipulate and manage these through a very simplified, integrated workflow. Rick, next slide. So as I mentioned, there's some new fields that you'll see in 23.1 on every asset. Now, regardless of whether you enroll in the program, these fields will be there for you. There are a field that you can identify who the telematics service provider is, and it will be a validated table listing all the customers that AssetWorks has integrations with, either through our telematics cloud or directly. There's also a field to identify the data science provider, which is Pitstop at this point, and is the only choice that you have. And then also what the telematic protocol is whether or not this is an ODB2 or a JBus equipped vehicle. These are added in M5 as part of a screen designer foundation, and you can add them to any unit main screen on your own. On the FA side, there'll be new fields on the equipment record, and you can control them like you do on any other fields that you have in FA. We also are adding these to the data loader to help you set up this data. We recognize that this is something that a lot of our customers have been asking for, that they're trying to keep track of this. Many of you might use items or attributes, or if you co-opted a code to do this, but having these fields now will give us permanent fields on the asset record to make it easy to filter by and find all my Geotab vehicles and all my Samsara and so on. So we see this as good benefit in addition to what we have. Rick, you want to slide the next? And so where do we get the savings? And so one of the things we want to be able to use the analytics platform is to help you recognize savings. And so we're looking at sort of these 4 areas that we got from our pilot study as where we think the opportunities for savings will be. One is just in general in breakdowns. So anytime that we can predict a failure and avoid that failure, we're going to avoid that breakdown. And along with it, all the associated costs. That's getting, one of the areas where we see this is important too, is anything that's transporting passengers or, cargo, particularly food, perishables, things like that. Having a breakdown in those scenarios becomes mission critical. We want to avoid that. So I think when we look at which assets benefit, that type of application is a good one to have this sort of remote monitoring on. Just as Shiva mentioned, the remote monitoring diagnosis, the time being saved by being able to just not have to necessarily connect directly to the vehicle, just to get those alerts and understand what the messages are. Dan at Long Beach, Dan Bolenbach, fleet manager, identified technician empowerment. He sees that this is really a big tool for helping with the technicians by putting a lot of information in their hands so that the technician can now make a decision about what they're going to be doing with a complete picture easily available without having to do a lot of additional work. And we do see this as a way to reduce also probably the mean time to repair and some rework, because one, we have a better understanding going into it what the problem is, so we can address it quicker and fix it right the first time. And then lastly, as Shiva mentioned, just getting into prescriptive maintenance. Today, we tend to routinely see vehicles more frequently than we need to. With the advent of oil monitoring and other systems now, the vehicles can tell us when they need their fluids changed. And with the health monitoring through the remote diagnostics and the sensor monitoring, we can start to identify issues that we can be scheduling in more on as they look to be occurring, as opposed to, oh, let's just do it because we got to be careful. So I think we can reduce the number of PMs, and I think that's going to be a big savings for many of us, just not only reducing downtime, but also in customer service and just being able to do more with fewer people. Rick, just want to wrap up here, I think, with one. So if you're thinking about this, what assets would I want to include in this? Well, first off, do you have telematics? This is a telematic dependent solution. So it does require the vehicle to have an onboard computer feeding data to it. So, having an asset tracker on a trailer isn't going to give you predictive analytics. It'll tell you where it is, but it's not going to have that in there. And vehicles that aren't connected, we're just not going to be able to read. The complexity of the asset, we did find makes a big difference in that the frequency and the number of occurrences and messages we're getting is definitely higher in our medium duty and heavy duty fleets than it is in the light duty. And particularly when we start getting into work trucks with powered units on the back, we find that those were bringing up a lot more. The complexity to maintain it, and what it impacts to you on downtime, and can't even get a spare. Those type of mission critical, expensive things, these are the things you want to be watching. These are the ones that we think we can have the greatest impact on in the shortest amount of time and give you the biggest savings. And then also, what are the things do you have the things around to maintain some of these? And so having the ability to diagnose that can help. And so just to kind of wrap up, I think what we want to say is that when you're looking at your fleet, your work trucks and your transport should be the things that if I were going to pilot this today, I would be looking at. I'd look at within my categories, what are some of those key units that are costing you a lot, that have a lot of downtime, that you got connected to your telematics, that you think you can start to monitor and test. This is a great way to try it out and pilot a program. Pick a couple of your key things and let's work out a pilot with you and try this out and try it out in real time and see for yourself how it can help your operation. So with that, I think we're going to respond to some questions that have been posted. Rick, you want to tell us what's being asked?
For sure. So yeah, we are ready to hear from our attendees at this time. So we are going to open up the floor for some of your questions. As I had mentioned, if you do have questions, you can enter them in the Teams chat, and you also have the option to raise your hand. We'll then take you off mute, however, whichever route you sort of prefer. What I thought we could do here is sort of go back to the initial pilot and some of the questions that as a group we were sort of regularly seeing. And Shiva, just to sort of get the ball rolling here, I know one common question we encountered quite a bit with our customers here was, would you say that customers need to have a strong preventive strategy before starting with predictive analytics?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when you look at pure preventative today, the best case is actually over maintaining. So it's bringing in vehicles very often, checking them twice, checking them 3 times, and hopefully you catch everything. So fleets that don't have a very robust process is actually good. You're probably trying your best to maintain it efficiently. So this will help you in that journey, even if you're ad hoc and just trying to put out fires. This will exactly help you figure out what fires to put out first. So our thought process is that it's not a you need step 1 of full preventative rolled out as one of the best fleets before you do predictive. It's actually you want to use in analytics to help you not over maintain, but use your resources more efficiently. So it's really a tool in your toolbox to help you do what you're doing today, just a little bit better. That's how we think about it. And that's what we're seeing by working with other customers and fleets.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. I just want to pass over this question came from one of our attendees. So is historical telematics data validated as part of this, for example, to predict vehicle failures?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Rick, or talk about it. It's probably more on your side than mine.
Okay. All right. So yeah, historical information is the key for this. So when fleet is turned on, we'll pull, depends on what telematics systems you use, but it'll pull anywhere from 6 months, sometimes up to 12 months ahead of time to look at what type of faults and alerts were popping up. And then as we work with integration through AssetWorks, we're pulling that maintenance history to kind of match it. So how many cases were there alerts before some sort of repair or replace event or breakdown event? And we try to match those scenarios up. And those are the scenarios that the system will try to prioritize. So when these occurrences happen again, this pattern appears again, then we definitely want to make sure we tell you, hey, there's a high chance this situation might pop up again. So history is very valuable. But the benefit is because assets are very different across fleets and type, but at the same time, they have a lot of similarities. So all vehicles will have, you know, an engine, a powertrain, a battery, a tire. So a lot of the intelligence can be actually benchmarked across all vehicles being analyzed on a platform. So even if you come in and you're like, I don't have that much data yet, well, you'll start off the bat with insights that has been trained from the population of about 500,000 assets or so. So you'll already start really far ahead. And then as your data comes in, it'll get very specific to your fleet and your experiences.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate that, when we did the Long Beach pilot, there hadn't been a lot of experience with CNG, for example, that you know, Pitstop had worked with. But over the course of the time, we did start to, you know, gain insights into those vehicles. And you know, as you get more information, these models get stronger and reinforced and get more accurate. So we're really at the infancy into the, you know, the pool of data that we're able to pull in. But as we expand and add in more customers and more assets, this is just going to get much bigger. And one of the key things, going back to that validation point, one of the things that we are going to be doing with the application going forward is linking corrections to past insights. Currently, right now, we can sort of look at, all right, we got the insight occurred over this time span, and then we can kind of look around that time span and say, oh, we did a O2 sensor 3 weeks later. In this case, you know, so we can kind of correlate the two. Now we're going to actually ask you to do a direct correlation so that the models get much more accurate, much more faster.
All right, thank you both. We did have a question on data governance. So how is this ensured across multiple system integrations, data governance and security, that is?
Yeah, so we are utilizing the AssetWorks API to expose the data to Pitstop. There is a special endpoint that Pitstop will have access to that will give them the unit number, the VIN, some basic assignment information, you know, which department they are, so that they can then correlate that to a user that they have set up in their system. And then they'll have access to your job level history to pull the repair data out to start to correlate that information with the sensor information. And that's being done through, again, through a secure API where Pitstop basically will have a token that they'll be validated. So they will only have access to the vehicles that you've identified are enrolled in the Pitstop's program. And they'll be able to pull then just that restricted history that we give them. We're not going to give them every piece of data, but give them enough that they can utilize in their models to identify what was repaired, what was the problem, what was the solution, you know, the corrective action, and so on. But it is all going to have validations.
Okay. Mark,
And one
when
of
you
the
show-
things, one of the validations
Okay.
just that we do ask you to do is that if you're not using VMRS system assembly codes, we will ask you to map your codes to the VMRS system code so that we can translate that, because we are doing our analysis centered on the VMRS coding.
Okay. Mark, one of your initial slides after Shiva passed over was it kind of showed a screenshot of some of the insights that were captured during the study, and one of the attendees here notes that mission essential vehicles are key. The screenshot you showed had a lot of different insights that would be, I suppose, more insightful to someone at a physical location. What about sending messages to drivers? So, for instance, a driver on the road is told that your vehicle needs a radiator cap and you are 1.5 miles away from the shop. We have a radiator cap in stock and ready to put it on. Is that something that's
Well,
scheduled with a
yeah,
solution?
well, it'd be one thing for us to say your vehicle has a faulty O2 sensor, and we can send you an alert. And we actually, one of the fields on there is safe to complete route. So one of the things you can indicate is whether or not this message is something that is not safe, and then that can cause a critical and immediate a notification. Shiva, do you have the ability to notify directly to the driver, or is it just a contact at the department?
It can go down to the driver. Depends on the setup though. If they want a push notification to a tablet or app or an email trigger, so it all depends.
Yeah, that's unfortunately driver assignment's a very fluid thing. So maintaining that, getting those type of messages directly to a driver can be a challenge. But we do have a method in place to alert you to these critical things. So, and again, these can be organized by location, correct? Right, too, Shiva?
Yeah, exactly. Each facility, such that only the individuals responsible for that facility will see those assets.
And those messages.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And metrics related to that facility only.
All right, just a quick time check. We do have 11 minutes scheduled here. Some good discussion and questions coming in. We're going to try to get to all of them. And if we don't and we haven't run out of time, just be assured we will follow up with you and get you an answer, or sort of further your point if it's more of a comment. So one attendee asks about predictive trends. Would we say this is on par with entangles?
I'm not
I think
aware of what that
that's
is.
kind of like yeah, I think that's maybe another vendor that does some sort of analytics, but we'd probably I would happy to talk to you directly and compare or share what we're doing in depth. But generally speaking, the type of analytics is around systems like the electrical system, looking at tires, depending on TPMS access. So it really depends on the asset type. I think someone was mentioning their Tesla in the chat that gave them an alert to rotate tires. So these alerts are as good as your sensors. There's truth to that. But most assets for after treatment, electrical system, the powertrain, those systems which cause like 80 to 90% of these downtime events based on our analysis can be alerted ahead of time and support the process. So we think today there's already a lot of value, and as more sensors come in, it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and I think someone asked too, I saw that, about, these mission critical vehicles and things. One of the things we did see is that the level of alerts that we get in medium and heavy duty is much higher than on the light duty side. If you think about it, and for most people, those aren't mission critical. There's usually subs and things like that for them. So, but when you start getting into the medium heavy duty, hours of downtime become very expensive for those. And we do see a lot of multiple messaging coming from those vehicles. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to definitely make sure we got to that sort of comment about the predictive analytics working as well as how the vehicle's equipped. So I'm glad we touched on that. We did get a question about, basically how the data is transformed. So, the assumption here is that this would be based on, one organization's own data. Have we considered the possibility to really use a larger pool or depository from, say, multiple fleets or multiple organizations, multiple locations, so that for the sake of a larger data pool, you're getting stronger insights from that and are able to better predict future issues or breakdowns?
We are actually, this is a big data pool that as more customers sign up, as Shiva mentioned, we're not only looking at your F-150s, but we're also looking at every other customer's F-150s. And so the more we get more types, the better the data, the bigger the data, and the more accurate we get. And that's where that transformation of the data to the VMRS standard is important, because that gives us one language to work from. So, and generally that's done by we just give you, here are the codes. You have to do a little mapping and some setup. And then once you do that, it's all done in the background. So it's a little bit of work up front, but once it's done, you're able to go.
Okay. Before I get to the next question, just wanted to provide a quick clarification. Thanks, Bob, for chiming in on the driver insights. There is a mobile app within the AssetWorks offering. It does allow for instant operator updates. So happy to discuss that with you further, should that be of interest. This is a common one. So what does a customer and an AssetWorks customer who's using Fleet Focus, what does their setup need to look like to use this, Mark? So we know that this requires telematics. It all starts there, the actual physical devices in the vehicles. But does it require the telematics module? Do you have to be using the readings from Fuel Focus? Can it be done without the full module? What does this all look like, if you wouldn't mind breaking that down for the attendees here?
Maybe, and this is where Mike can probably step in and help with on that setup as well. But generally, yes, you're going to have the telematics on the big picture architecturally, and I'll let Mike talk about it specifically. But we use the telematics cloud. We partitioned part of it off to be the predictive cloud, and that data will come into there. So, and then from there, we are using the existing telematics workflow in M5 and FA. So if you have, if you're familiar with the telematics preferred job, the telematics fault query, and those screens, we are using, you can set that up within the application, and there's a workflow that exists there. Mike can tell you about the components needed.
Yeah, so you have that right, Mark. So the pieces you do need, I mean, theoretically you can, if you do, as long as you have a telematics in place today, you can get some just the insights as a kind of a starting point. But for any integration, creating work requests, service requests within Fleet Focus, you are going to need the telematics cloud. You will need the telematics module. So we'll need to have the integration with your telematics completed. And as you expand our functionality, that when we get down to where we're going to have the mobile focus technician and supervisor inside access, of course, you're also going to need the mobile focus enterprise application from the organization as well. So,
but let me add one point to that though, Mike. It's not a requirement. Mobile focus will not be a requirement. It will work without the mobile focus following the existing workflow. You're just not gonna, you just have to use the existing core process as opposed to the more simplified mobile process. That'll be all.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a enhancement if you chose to in the future.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that you chiming in and breaking that down for us. All right, so one of the attendees observes that the model, from what they saw, would be on the back end, limiting one's ability to make any changes or adjustments, at least presumably. So we talked about false alerts, and can we just talk a little bit more about the actual interface and what users will be able to adjust to set up helpful alerts only? Mark, you talked a little bit about how we weeded through the full set of alerts and insights with Long Beach.
Yeah, so what we'll have is one, like I said, we're not going to make these into work requests automatically. So the alerts will be fed into the application and stored as alerts. If anyone's on the telematics cloud today and you get alerts, they're going to basically look very much like that, except they'll be enhanced. There'll be more data, including notes that Pitstop maintains through some sources that they have around the various alerts that they generate. So they're curating that information and they're going to pass that to us, and we're going to populate that into the job notes. And then when the user adds an insight to a work request or to a job. And so the insights will, they're basically going to be held on their own little world, but linked to work orders. And you can have a work order can have many insights on it, and a job can have many insights on it. And so that's generally sort of how the back end piece is there. From a user control standpoint, we have the preferred job screen today in Fleet Focus that you can, by protocol and PID or SID or whatever the the ID is, you can assign a default job so that regardless of how maybe Pitstop sends it to us, you can assign a standard job. So every time you get an O2 sensor alert, you're going to replace the O2 sensor. You can set that level of control up if you want. I know of only one customer that has gone to that exercise. And generally what most people do is just have a generic diagnosis job. All the codes get dumped into that, and then they do the work to follow on. What we're going to ask you to do is, when you do the follow-on work, tell us which code you fixed in that follow-on, or which job fixed that code in order to clear it.
So I will just say, excellent job to our presenters. I would like to thank all of our attendees for taking the time to attend today's presentation. And of course, really want to thank both Shiva and Mark and Mike as well from Pitstop and AssetWorks respectively for sharing their expertise and latest technology highlights with everybody today. And as you can see on the question slide here, contact information is available should any of you have any follow-up questions or concerns and want to reach out directly.